or any other public facing site. It's being recorded for those who said that they could not attend today's session, but wanted to watch the recording afterwards. So with that, I invite today's phenomenal speakers to introduce themselves, starting with Meredith, and a very happy birthday to her as well. And Meredith, your first up.
Okay. Nice to meet you all. I wish I could see your faces. I guess I'll see you off on camera a little bit later. But I am representing both the board of the initiative as a board member, and professionally, I teach leadership, and I'm an executive and team coach and facilitator. Barry?
Okay, yeah, you see I'm on, okay. Yeah, my name is Barry Johnson, and I've been working with people in a lot of places, learning about how polarity thinking can be applied around the world. And I'm a partner with Polarity Partnerships.
And Cliff?
Hi, everyone. My name is Cliff Kaiser. I'm also with Polarity Partnerships. I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm an executive coach, and I do organization development as well.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to pull up Meredith's the slides here. And hold on. Let me just share that. And so Meredith, you can let me know when you want me to change the slides for you. Okay. You're on mute. Of course.
You know, 10 hours of Zoom a day just isn't enough to learn.
I know. It's not a Zoom meeting until somebody talks while they're on mute. So now we can start.
So we've already spoken a little bit about the initiative, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about how the initiative is related to polarity thinking, or basically where we got here and why we're talking about this today. If you can go to the next slide, please. So one of the key components of the initiative is a database called Central. And the initiative has developed this analytics platform in collaboration with an analytics firm, as well as with the police departments that are engaging in the platform. And the idea was to provide objective analysis that would help a police department to assess how well they're doing when it comes to community policing practices. And if they participate in Central, and we hope to continue to evolve this platform, if you can go to the next slide, please. They get this scorecard. And as you see here, when it comes to this scorecard, they would get a platinum, silver, or gold rating. Now, self-awareness is certainly key, and it's important to provide an objective way and different metrics. Again, metrics that are related to community policing, as opposed to other metrics that might be used in terms of how law enforcement is often evaluated. But we certainly didn't want to stop there at the initiative, right? You know, you have a great score, stop there, a medium score, a terrible score, and now kind of figure it out. Our goal was really to provide a report with a real roadmap, especially for those police departments who want to improve their score, and help them to figure out how to do that. As you can guess, in terms of my role on the board, I was very interested in helping to support in particular training and programming out of this. And so if you turn to the next slide, we started looking at a number of different training solutions. And in fact, one of the individuals that's working with us on our polarity work is the woman who is going to be our partner in providing mindfulness training, right? So that might be an area where a police department might want to invest. But you can imagine when we start thinking about programs and how to better engage the community with their police departments, this idea of facilitating critical dialogue was really important. And, I've been facilitating hundreds of groups every year for 20 years now. And I said to Nadine and Emma, I don't know how to do this, right? I don't know how to go into a community and get a community and a police department having the right conversations and creating that, helping them to really, again, engage in safe and productive conversations. And so when I thought about, the debate that's going on in our communities and in our media, one of the things that I just heard over and over again, and it was very triggering for me, and I imagine it's very triggering for others on this call, is a lot of either or, right? So you're either for the police or you're against the police, right? You're either for safety or you're against safety. You're either, for the present or you're for the future, right? And I thought there's really no way that as long as we think in these kind of zero-sum frameworks that we're ever going to get anywhere. And that's where the light bulb went off, based on my exposure to polarity thinking. And I thought we have to figure out a way to shift the mindset of both communities as well as police departments and all of the other stakeholders who are involved in that, in what we often will call both and thinking, right? How do we make sure, sometimes we call it win-win solutions, right? We need to figure out a way to align on a shared vision. And so that's where, I brought polarity thinking to the initiative. And so if we were to double click on this leadership development, right, how do we then take this and move it forward? And again, we're not just going to drop into a community and just hope we work this out. We want to pilot. And that's a big part of what the initiative is trying to do, is create proven concepts that then can be replicated and multiplied throughout communities. And so, Polarity Partnerships, when we talked with them, they already had this initiative to support these kind of efforts, which we are so grateful. And then together, what we decided would be the best approach would be to create a diverse design team that is as close as possible to what we might encounter in a community. So, a design team that includes advocacy groups, community members, faith representatives, consultants, facilitators, and of course, members of the police. And we took this design team and we're still working together, and we're all getting certified in the principles of polarity thinking. And again, you'll be hearing the rest of the time, we'll be talking about that. And as part of that certification, the final step is to do your own kind of practicum. And so we are going to be doing multiple practicums or pilots using these principles, having all been certified in the process, to conduct pilot projects. And you'll hear about some of the case studies of the past in polarity thinking in this area. And we hope to create lots of new tools and examples that then we can promote to help bring these ideas to other communities. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick look at, who are the members of our design team. And so we have, wonderful representation from, community advocacy and policy groups with Safe and Sound, Center for Court Innovation, and also the Leadership Conference for Civil and Human Rights. From the police, we have representatives from Noble. Actually, one individual I just saw is here today, so thrilled about that and hearing from him. Mindful Junkies, so the woman who's doing our teaching on mindfulness, and she works exclusively with, not exclusively, but she dedicates a lot of her time to working with first responders, and so has a lot of familiarity with that community. And then again, we have a rabbi, we have a minister, we have consultants and facilitators, as well as members of the academic community. And so together, we are taking these principles and developing the models, developing the maps and the tools, and certainly the confidence for all of us as future facilitators of this work on what are going to be the right ways to bring these to communities. So with that, I will turn it over to Barry, and now you'll hear a lot more about polarity thinking. Thank you.
You're on mute. Well,
Okay, so here I am. Thanks for letting me know. So what I'd like to do today is just to share with you some of the basics about polarities, what they are, how they work, and we're going to work with an example of resistance to change in a large organization located in 46 countries to appreciate where resistance shows up when you're trying to make a change effort, whether it's in the community or in a large organization, where this resistance comes from and how to address that resistance more effectively with a polarity lens. So a polarity lens is helpful around dealing with resistance to change and polarization. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And then we'll look at how that applies in trying to make positive change in a community. I gotta get, okay, so polarities are interdependent pairs that exist in our life in which we need to connect them with and. So for example, activity and rest. We get up in the morning and we're playing or we're working or whatever, but we get stimulated by the activity, which is great. But over time, if we focus on activity to the neglect of rest, we find ourselves being exhausted. And so if we're exhausted, we need to, take a nap or go home and get some sleep and get rest to be rejuvenated. Notice when you're exhausted, the upside of rest, rejuvenated, looks like a solution to the exhaustion problem. And in one sense it is, but in an ongoing sense, it's really not a solution. It's a necessary self-correction in an ongoing oscillation. If we stay with rest long enough, we experience its limits where we have boredom, we have muscle atrophy. So it's not helpful to connect activity and rest with the word or. It's a false choice. Am I going to be active or am I going to get rest? Of course, we need both. It's very obvious because over time, we need to be both stimulated and rejuvenated. So that's the essence of polarities. And we live in these polarities all the time. They're everywhere. But what happens if we want to do something special, then we talk about leveraging a polarity and we use a polarity map. And this is what a polarity map looks like. So if we put activity and rest on a polarity map and say we have at the top of the map our greater purpose, we want to run a marathon. Now, everybody in the world is living within the polarity of activity and rest, but not everybody can run a marathon. So what you have to do to run a marathon, let's say you're in a 6-month process to prepare to run a marathon, you have to be more intentional about activity and rest, about this polarity available to everyone. So on the activity side, what you want to do is you want to maximize both upsides and minimize the downsides. That's why the infinity loop looks the way it does. So if you can do that well, you can run a marathon. So let's look at how that happens. The positive results of activity in terms of running a marathon is you increase your endurance. And we have action steps to support that increased endurance. So you run further most workout days. The upside of rest is that muscles build. Muscles build actually on the rest cycle, not on the activity part of the cycle. That assumes you have been active. If you're active, your muscles build while you rest. So we need to have action steps to support the muscle build. We need to get adequate downtime between the workouts. So with all polarities, there are these two poles, each of which has an upside that's essential. And as you oscillate between them, you want to maximize both upsides and minimize the downsides, which is why the infinity loop here looks the way it does. Now, with all polarities, there are two downsides also. So if you have activity without rest, it's going to lead to muscle injury. So you need to identify early warnings to minimize the likelihood that you get a muscle injury. So for example, an early warning could be that you feel tired when you wake up in the morning. This might be because you had to work late that night before. Your plan on your regimen is to run 15 miles, but you may say, wait a minute, I think I'm going to cut back to 10 miles today just because I'm feeling tired. I've got some early warnings. That could cause a muscle injury if I push myself this morning. So that's one downside. The downside of rest without activity is muscle atrophy. So how would I know early that I'm headed towards muscle atrophy? It could be that I missed a workout day. Now, if you're in a 6-month regimen, missing a workout day is clearly not a big problem, but you can't continue to miss workout days or that will undermine you and have muscle atrophy. So with all polarities, once you see that you have one, you can intentionally leverage it in order to gain your greater purpose. In this case, it's leveraging activity and rest by getting both upsides with action steps and minimizing both downsides by early warnings. Now, what happens with polarities, if you overfocus on one pole to the neglect of the other, first you get the downside of the pole on which you overfocus, and then you get the downside of the other pole as well. So an example of this is my son, Tim, who's qualified more than once for the Boston Marathon. One time between qualifying in Detroit and running in the Boston Marathon, he overfocused on the activity side and pushed himself too hard without adequate paying attention to building his muscles. And so he ended up having shin splints. So now he found himself having muscle injury, which led to muscle atrophy, and he found himself that he couldn't run the marathon. So what happens, this is important with all polarities. You need to maximize both upsides and minimize the downsides. And if you can do this, you can be effective and gain results that you couldn't get by focusing on either of them alone. So I want to talk now just with that brief understanding of how polarities look and work with this one metaphor. I want to talk about a situation that I'd like you to imagine yourself that you're on a call with a Fortune 100 company that's located in 46 countries. And we're going to be able to identify how there was resistance to change in this particular scenario that also applies to change in communities, which we'll get to next. So in this situation, I'm on the phone with three people, the chief operating officer, the chief learning officer, and the head of the design team, who was preparing for a 4-day leadership celebration session at their corporate headquarters here in the United States. And they were bringing in about 250 people from these 46 countries to have this celebration, and they were going to spend a half a day introducing them to polarity thinking. Some of the leaders knew about polarity thinking, and I'd had some contact with them, so they wanted to bring me in as a resource for the half day. As we're having this conversation on the phone, one of the first things they say to me is they say, well, Barry, we want you to know our theme for our 4-day leadership session, and it's leading through values. And I said, well, that's terrific, because I think values come in pairs. So if I work with organizations and they're just starting, their organization in the creation process, and they're looking at their values, I encourage them to put them in pairs. If they already have a set of values, I encourage them to see, we look at the list of values together. And if they had, for example, a value of activity, I'd look in that value system to see, did they have rest anywhere? Not because I've got anything against activity, but I know that activity without rest will be a problem. And so I said, that just creates a vulnerability. And so the chief operating officer said, wait a minute, Barry, if you're going to be talking about our values in front of our top 250 people, I want to know what you would do with it. So I'm going to send you our values right now so we can just take a look at this. So they did. So we've got a polarity map. I'm wanting in this conversation with them to give them a competitive advantage in terms of a thriving organization. They can compete in the world. And the deeper fear at the bottom here, we call the top the greater purpose. The deeper fear is that they can't compete. And they had autonomous business units as one of their strong values. Now, if you're located in 46 countries, you need some autonomy for your business units located all over the world. But as I'm looking at that list, what I'm wondering is, what might be an interdependent pair, if you will? What will they need to pay attention to if they build a lot of autonomy in their business units? What else will they need to pay attention to as an important value in order to keep autonomous business units from becoming dysfunctional? So what I'd like you to do now is, in 5 seconds, I'd like you in the chat room. You can click on the chat room, it's right on the bottom of your screen here. Click on the chat room and just give me some words or phrases that you think of, what come to mind. What would they need to do to balance off autonomous business units to make sure it doesn't become a problem? What comes to mind? 5 seconds, go ahead. Anything showing up in the chat room? If you've got,
Yes, there's
Yes, so
all
we've
kinds
got,
of good stuff.
oh,
Go ahead, please.
go ahead, Cliff.
We have
So
things
we've
like
got-
centralized processes, communication, collaboration.
Command and control,
Yeah. Okay, great. Exactly. So
quality control.
okay, great. So let me just share with you what I came up with, which fits with exactly what you were talking about. What we're looking for here when we're building a polarity map is not sort of one exact word that fits, but a general category of something we need to pay attention to make sure that autonomous business units doesn't become problematic. And so there was central control, systematic integration, something like that. I said to them, I don't notice anything like centralized control or integrated business units. And this would be focusing on the whole. So you focus on the parts having autonomy, but in the whole, we want to have integration of those business units. And so I said, you don't have anything like the things that you came up with. And I called it integrated business units. So they said, yeah, well, that's clear. There were only about 6 values that they had as their top values. And they said, so what do you make of that? And I said to them, well, your organization is experiencing or will experience some negative results from over-focusing on autonomous business units to the neglect of integrated business units. And this was my concern because they had autonomous business units, but nothing like integrated business units on their values. So they're likely to over-focus on autonomous business units. So my question to you, another 5 seconds. In this large global corporation located in 46 countries, if they over-focus on autonomous business units to the neglect of integrated business units, what are they likely to experience in their corporation around the world? 5 seconds. So Cliff, you want to read those out?
Sure. Silos is one answer.
Yeah.
Duplication of efforts came up.
Yeah.
Those were the first 2. Poor corporate culture.
Okay.
They're still just coming in competitive, internal competitiveness. So almost like a,
yeah, exactly. So again, notice how it doesn't take much time for you to figure out what might be showing up here. And so what I suggested to them, I gave them a longer list, but notice how these fit with exactly what you've said. You're going to have silos. I said to them, your organization is experiencing or will experience the following dysfunctions. You're going to have silos and isolation of these business units, and you're going to have excess competition. And then I said, at some point, you are going to identify this as a problem for your organization. When you do, you're going to bring together all of your business unit heads from around the world and your executive team, and you're going to agree together what you need to do for a solution. Now, so this becomes a problem solution orientation. What are we going to do to solve the problem? From a polarity perspective, rather than seeing this, if you see it as a polarity, rather than seeing it as a problem with a solution, you see it as a necessary self-correction in an ongoing infinity loop. So what you're looking for up here, and again, I'm going to ask you give you 5 more seconds. What would be the positive results from doing a good job of integrating those business units? What are they going to say they're going to do in order to get the benefits of integrated business units? 5 seconds, go. What do we got?
All right. I'll start reading them off as soon as I see them. Common vision, aligned execution,
Yep.
better communication and synergy. Those are the first 3. So
yeah,
there's more, but
yeah, exactly. Those all work. So exactly. So what I said to them, you're going to want to move from silos and isolation to integration, from excess competition to collaboration, and exactly the other things that you mentioned. They all fit there as a natural, what is the natural self-correction from this one downside, the upside of the other? And everything you said fits. So, but I didn't stop there. I said, you're going to get the group together and you're going to identify what you want to do as a solution, and then you're not going to go there. Now there's silence on the end of the phone. And so I break the silence and I say, hello. And the chief operating officer comes back with a very gruff voice and he says, who have you been talking to? And I said, I haven't been talking with anybody, but I just know how values work and how polarities work. And so this is a fairly predictable outcome. And he said, well, wait a minute. he said, I understand how from our autonomous business units value, you would, anticipate we'd have some silos and excess competition. And I also understand how you would say what we're going to do about it is go after some integration and collaboration. But did I hear you correctly when you're saying that we weren't going to walk our talk? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, I want to know how you knew that, because 2 years ago, I held that meeting. We agreed to the person, every business unit head and the whole executive team, and we agreed in terms of getting alignment throughout the whole organization. We all agreed to the person. That's where we needed to go, and we had plenty of money to spend on it. We had everything we needed to make this change. We have hardly moved an inch in 2 years. I want to know how you knew that we weren't going to walk our talk, because it's costing us millions. And I said, well, that's why I'm coming to spend a half a day with you. But essentially, what I understood was that they were looking at something as a problem to solve from an either or mindset, and they saw it as a gap analysis. Our present state is silos, our future state is integration. We just need a strategy to go to integration and collaboration. But when you put their problem and solution on a polarity map, there are a couple of other elements. And there's an upside to autonomous business units, and there's a downside to integrated business units, and they represent something that this organization will be trying to hold on to and something they're trying to avoid or afraid of. So let's look at what those might be. So what would be the positive results from doing a good job of allowing autonomy in your business units, especially now if your business units are located in 46 countries? Positive results, which cause them, by the way, to have autonomous business units in their value in the first place. What are those positive results for autonomy? 5 seconds.
Do you want them to put that in the chat?
In the chat room,
okay.
Yeah. Yep. Just
We've already, I think they're already clued in on this. Local responsiveness, innovation, increased productivity at the local level, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Speed came up.
Great. Great.
Agility.
Okay, we can stop there. Notice, by the way, what's happening here. You are able to fill out a polarity map relatively quickly. It's a matter of, just a few seconds. And why are you able to do this? Because all of us have been in some version of this part-whole polarity, regardless of the size of our organization. So everything you said fit. Entrepreneurial initiative and speed and responsiveness are two of those that you mentioned. So this is a huge, powerful upside. Notice that it's missing in the gap analysis. We often assume if we've got a problem and a solution in mind, all we need is a strategy to get there and everybody will go. I'm saying, no, if you have an unconscious assumption that this is an either or issue, then what happens is you get unconscious resistance from the other parts of the map. So in this organization, the whole culture was based on entrepreneurial initiative and speed and responsiveness. So if you value that at 99 on 100 scale, you'll be afraid of losing it at 99 on 100 scale. So the stronger the value that you're holding on to, the stronger the fear of the downside quadrant, which you want to avoid. And what would they want to avoid? It's the opposite of entrepreneurial initiative and speed. They'd be afraid of losing that. What would be the negative results from over-focusing on integrated business units to the neglect of autonomous business units? What do we got, Cliff? Write it in the chat.
Okay, so you want people to put that in the chat. Losing their voice, lack of creativity. Those are the first couple of things that came in. Favoritism.
Yep.
Came up. Sameness.
Yeah. Exactly. So what happens is, if you love entrepreneurial initiative, you'll be afraid of bureaucracy and red tape. If you like speed and responsiveness, you'll be concerned about things being slow and the things that you mentioned. So what happens here is, with all polarities, is that you need to maximize both upsides. But if you end up seeing one downside as a problem and the upside of the other as a solution, and you overlook the upside of the pole that you came from, they got in trouble because they over-focused on this pole. But it doesn't mean it's not good stuff. But when you over-focus on this to the neglect of this, you get this downside, the lower left, right? When you want to go here, the problem with going there is that there's an unconscious fear, unstated fear, that you will lose this upside and get yourself caught down here. So when I got together with them, when they did have their leadership meeting, What we did was we had them in table groups of 6. There were 250 of them in table groups of 6, and we had this polarity map. They had a thriving organization here. They changed that label to thriving organization, but they had autonomous business units and integrated business units, and declining organization here. Thriving and declining, I think, was their content. And so what they did was they generated the map in all the table groups, and then we had them get into what would be action steps that would support the upside of the pole we're trying to hold on to. So paradoxically, if you want to move towards integrated business units and collaboration, the first thing you do is say, what are the action steps we're going to do to make sure we hold on to our entrepreneurial initiative and speed? We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, what is the baby? Okay, so we need, what are we going to hold on to? Then they looked at action steps. What are we going to do to enhance our integration and our collaboration? And then what would be early warnings that would let us know that we're starting to get into bureaucracy and be slow and responsive? And what would early warnings be that would let us know that we're being into excess competition or silos? So, that process, by the way, which took a half a day with them, changed radically how they looked at leveraging this issue, because it wasn't about just getting to integration and collaboration. It was about combining entrepreneurial initiative and speed with integration and collaboration. It was a both and dimension. So here are the key points. If a change you're trying to make is essentially a move from the downside of one pole of a polarity as the problem to the upside of the interdependent pole as a solution, you'll generate unnecessary resistance, and the results of the struggle will be unsustainable. To make sustainable progress, key stakeholders will need to see both the underlying polarity and commit to action steps supporting both upsides. And you start with action steps for the pole you're moving from, then to action steps for the pole your change effort is moving to. So I want to quickly just share, that was in chapter 5 of the book that I've written about this. And in chapter 7, I talk about how this applies in communities and at the national level or at the community level. So at the top, what we have here is the basics. I want to talk about, I assert that everyone has right to the basics. It's a human right to have the right to basics: food, clothing, shelter, work for a livable wage, healthcare, and safety. That those basics we all have a right to have. This is the same part whole polarity here, but we're instead of individual autonomous business units, we're looking now at focusing on the part of individuals within society, or the whole, the community. And we look at freedom and equality, which is a similar dimension, but I want to pay attention to what happens if in the larger society we overfocus on freedom to the neglect of equality. The negative results from overfocusing on individual freedom to the neglect of the common good are a loss of basics for more and more. A loss of the basics, there's a lack of food, and gross inequality around these basics. Gross inequality around food, clothing, shelter, housing, work, healthcare, and safety. So it's natural to see this as a problem, which it is. It's a tragic problem of gross inequality that shows up in the United States. Now, when we look at the solution, the positive results from focusing on the common good are some equality and paying attention to the common good. And we can provide basics for all, food, clothing, shelter, education, work, and healthcare. We can do that. But when we talk about moving towards basics for all, for example, just look at healthcare right now. If we look at providing basic healthcare for everyone, there is an unconscious resistance by those of us like myself who are in a position of privilege to that move, because there's two other dimensions. Just like in the organization, there's a dimension of resistance that shows up here. And what are the positive results from focusing on individual freedom? Individual freedom is one of the benefits, and it allows for abundance for some, living with a relative degree of plentifulness. And so we can have the possibility of abundance for some, and we can have basics for all. But if we connect these two poles with the word or, we assume that we can't have both abundance for some and basics for all. And what we end up being afraid of, the negative results from over-focusing on the common good to the neglect of individual freedom is the fear of the loss of freedom and the loss of abundance. So what I'm suggesting here is that in our efforts, in our community organizing, in our efforts to provide basics for everyone, which I believe is a human right, we will experience resistance to that move. And that resistance, by the way, will show up even from people who intellectually are saying they want to support it, even people they're on boards of directors moving towards, basic shelter for everyone. And to the degree that they unconsciously assume that they can't both keep their nice house and provide basic housing for everyone, it will undermine at the gut level their support, and we will in fact sabotage this effort. So we need to appreciate this underlying polarity and be explicit that this polarity is at play and that we can have both. Unless we do that, we will radically undermine our efforts in moving that direction. So, and we need to then pay attention to what are the action steps that we're taking to make sure that we continue to uphold individual freedom and abundance for some, and we can take action steps to make sure that we provide basics for all, including that whole list of basics. And we can pay attention to early warnings for the getting in the downside of one or the other. So my final point here is that and thinking is not a solution to poverty, racism, or sexism, but it is a process requirement. Without supplementing or thinking with and thinking, our most sincere efforts will be radically undermined, and no amount of money, commitment, or alignment will compensate. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn this over to Cliff.
Great. Wow. Thank you, Barry Johnson. You should all be thankful that you don't have to follow Barry Johnson. So in this piece here, what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring this to the community policing topic area, which is why you all showed up today. Now that you've got some good basics, both at the individual and the system level, we can start looking at some examples to consider in the planning and in the process of engaging a community, which includes police and the community, blue and Black partnerships. And there are a number. This is not obviously a complete list, but this is a sample list of some of the tensions that show up in the attempt to improve the relationship and the partnerships between communities and police. Notice that if you put an or a versus between each of these, what happens is, as Barry shared, is increased resistance and polarization. Each of these tensions requires and now that you've had the experience of walking through a couple of polarities, you see that the first step is to see the tension as an and not an or a versus. So once we see it as and, we've completed the first step, which is seeing. The next step is to say, okay, let's take one of these and let's map it. And we go through those 4 quadrants and we ask ourselves some questions. We actually improve the seeing by mapping, because we then understand a bit more about how these dynamics work. Then we can actually assess where are we in this tension, and from that assessment we can learn, and then we can begin developing strategies for leverage. So I thought what we would do is we could just imagine if we're working with a committed group of people who want to help heal and to improve the relationship between police and communities, what's a tension that we might want to look at? And we chose this one because we thought this would be an interesting one to work through together. And that is exactly what we're going to do. So we're again going to use the chat, and I'm going to try to make this a little bigger. And we are going to together walk through the 4 quadrants of the interior portion of this map. I've already identified the polarity. It's enforcement and engagement. This is something that's a tension in communities that's not going away, so it fits the criteria of a polarity. Both of the poles are either neutrally or positively named. So we tried to to take care of that. And then over time, if you're getting the benefits of each pole, it would contribute to a safe community. If you're enforcing well and engaging well, then the likelihood you're going to accomplish a safe community is much greater. If you're enforcing poorly and engaging poorly, then the likelihood that you're going to run into this deeper fear is significantly increased. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to just in real time use this map with you. And we're going to go through just like the way Barry did. I'm going to get some help from my colleagues here and as well as from you. We're going to start with both upsides. And I think just for today, I'm going to start over here on the engagement side. So if you were to answer the question, what are the upside benefits of engaging or community engagement in the partnership between police and communities? What do you get? What are the upside benefits of that? So if you could all put your responses in the chat, and then Nadine, if you could help me out by reading them off.
I will do that. Positive contacts, increased understanding, 2 understandings there. People feeling heard, trust, better lifestyle for locals, empathy, respect.
I think I missed one. What was that? Trust?
Trust, people feeling heard. Oh, you have that
I think
one?
better
Got
lifestyle.
that one.
Liberty or better lifestyle. Okay.
Miss reduced fear also.
Right. Liberty, reduced fear, relationships. Collaboration.
That's all I got space for right now. We're just doing a first cut. So let's stop there. By the way, I just want everyone on the call here to know, when we were going through the process with the design team at the initiative and the group that we pulled together, we went through this exact process with this exact same polarity. And for those of you who were there, I mean, these were some of the same,
Yes.
we heard some of the same things, didn't we?
Yes,
All
we
right,
did.
so let's move over here. We're going to start with this other upside in this case. So when you think about enforcement, what are the positive results from the positive benefits? And the question is right up here. The positive results of focusing on the left pole of enforcement. What do you get? What are the benefits?
We've got safety. Somebody put safety.
Okay.
I will add rule of law.
Are you a lawyer?
Lower crime rates. We have another trust.
Trust here.
Yeah, we have 2 trusts.
Mhm.
This one's going more slowly though. Order. There you go.
Order. Okay. I think we've got some police in the room, so.
Higher crime clearance.
Clearance.
Mhm.
Okay.
We have a question here slowly because it's a challenge with the word enforcement. So a definition. Justice is
Yeah, so
another one.
yeah, justice. And for the person who asked the question, if they didn't like the word enforcement, what would they change it to that would capture the benefits of maintaining the rule of law?
Policing. She would change it to policing.
Oh, okay. We'll just let's just add that right now in real time then.
Okay.
Okay. What are some other, we got a little bit more space here.
Yeah, we've got enforce peace. So, and I think I might have missed a few. Economic development. Peace. Peace for like not teeth, peace. Enforce peace.
Oh, okay.
And
That's pretty good. We're getting out
Someone
of
said a
space
known
here.
existence. I think we're missing a known existence and freedom.
okay.
We got freedom again.
And that's
That's not a problem.
enforced peace.
Peace.
Yes, yes,
Got it.
that's right.
All right. Did I miss anything?
Functioning society.
Okay, that's good.
And there's a question, but we
Right.
can talk about it after. It's a more general question. Why are we assuming the current problems would be solved? What else will emerge? But we can leave that for the Q&A portion if that's something you want to
Yeah.
give more time to.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to indulge that one. Let's finish the map here first. And so now let's move down here. And the question down here in the map is, what are the negative results of an over focus on enforcement and policing to the neglect of engagement? So what would start to show up here if we overdid these upsides to the neglect of these upsides? What would be the things that would start to happen?
Lack of trust came up first. Fear.
Hmm.
A couple of fears. Brutality. Anger. People don't feel heard. Injustice. Increased hostility and poor police community collaboration. Increased hostility. Discrimination, racial profiling. And inequity. I almost missed that one. I think I got them all.
Great. Not great. These are really hard to write.
Prison overflowing, but we're maxed for space, I guess.
Okay.
Okay.
Now we're going to come over here. What could possibly be wrong with engaging the community? Well, that's actually not the question. The question is, what would be the negative results of an over focus on engagement to the neglect of enforcement? So we're only engaging and we're not really enforcing that well. What would happen down here?
I'll go first. Oh, here we go. Gridlock. Is that for this question? All talk, no motion. Increase in crime, higher crime. Of 3 higher crimes. I would add chaos. This one's going more slowly. Distrust.
Yeah, this one's going slow, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Think about it. Engaging without enforcing. What happens?
Distrust, disorder. And possibly I'm going to add injustice. Victims might feel there's been an injustice, but there's no enforcement. One-sided view of what's happening. Lack of clarity. It's moving faster now. Gangs, cartels, ruling, dominating. Finger pointing. Immigration. I missed a couple, I think.
One person said innovative thinking. And
Sounds like a positive.
so maybe you can just address that where even if engagement could occur when there is an over focus on engagement at the neglect, maybe you can just talk to that idea.
Mm-hmm. And the item that was suggested was what?
Innovative thinking.
Innovative thinking.
And this is a negative. I just want to check with the person. So that would be something that would be a downside, something that you'd want to avoid. Just want to make sure they're responding to the question.
Nikki, maybe you can say a little more.
Yeah. You can go off mute, Nikki, and say it.
So your question, Cliff, was what would happen with focused engagement
Without policing or enforcement.
without policing or enforcement?
Yes.
I don't see that as only being a negative situation. Folks would step up, communities have stepped up, and there has been innovative thinking when that has happened. And so that's why I'm suggesting that, and we can talk more about that in a little while.
Oh, okay. Would that be a positive then of engagement?
It still fits under your grid of the way you defined your grid of engagement with lack of enforcement, because you're defining enforcement as coming
Okay.
from law enforcement or policing. Enforcement
Gotcha.
is much broader than that.
Sure.
But
Sure.
also,
Yeah.
also part of that quadrant is negative results, right? You see how it says.
Yeah, that's what the intention of this downside is, the negative things that you want, you don't want.
So let's
Gotcha.
move it to the top quadrant. One of the benefits would be
Right,
innovative thinking.
Younger benefit, exactly.
I want to make sure that's okay, because there are some nuances here that, and this is, could I just, we're actually done doing the mapping. So I would like to pause just to say, this process that we're engaged in right now is a values and language clarification process. This, exactly what's happening right in this moment, is the benefit of going through the seeing and mapping process, because what's happening now is we're getting clear on people's experience around this tension. And the clearer we get, the better and easier it will be for us to move forward faster together. But as long as we've got these questions circling around out there around what are actual benefits and what are limitations, then it might generate resistance or polarization. So I think this is a great example of what happens in communities when you've got a group of people, diverse key stakeholders, who are bringing their own experiences to bear in the mapping process. So it's unfortunate. This is just a kind of a webinar sort of thing that we're actually just doing a quick experience. But imagine if we're actually going through a process with a group over time, where we're mapping a couple of these tensions together, and we're actually being able to pull out and really understand and see ourselves and each other more completely through the process. It's very powerful. But for right now, I actually need to, just looking at the clock, need to shift a bit to just look at the fact that in a very short amount of time, in a very emotionally charged tension out there that every community is going through. Just, you don't have to listen to the news for very long before you hear it. We at least got fairly clear fairly quickly on what are the upside benefits of both of these poles that tend to be in tension with one another in service of the greater purpose, and what are the downside limitations that we would all like to try to avoid in that process. So when we map these tensions with brilliant key stakeholders like yourselves, we do hear some of there's very unique content that's generated because of the unique situations and contexts of different communities. But generally speaking, you start to hear some of the same general themes, and these are a few. Just, with unnecessary force, unsafe community because of excessive force or unnecessary use of force. And then the solution is effective police engagement with community, fosters partnerships to contribute to safety. What could possibly be wrong with that? Well, as Barry was explaining earlier, there's another dimension to this tension. And if we look at that dimension, we can see there's a positive over here, and there's also a potential limitation down here in the form of excessive crime. So I like your map better, frankly, because you generated it and it has a lot more meaning for you because it's yours. And that is very simple, very quick example of how when you go through a process and you've had an opportunity outside of an or thinking alone mindset, you can get further faster. Now, just to take this to the next level in terms of, all right, that's interesting, but so what? The next thing that would happen with a group is we would develop early warning signs to make sure that we don't find ourselves in these downsides. This is where we limit the possibilities of sinking too low. You can't get rid of the tension, but you can minimize the downside limitations. And we don't want status quo solutions, and I say solutions in quotes there, that result in no change for communities and police and a continuation of existing problems that are unsustainable. That's not okay. Down here, a couple of early warning signs. Reactive solutions that result in poor quality outcomes for communities and police, or new problems that are created that end up being unsustainable. So we don't want to flip over to this other pole to the neglect of at least the positive benefits of the enforcement pole that end us up in this downside. Now on the upside here, and you heard a bit from Meredith about this in terms of what the initiative is geared to do. And what's great about the initiative is they have developed what we call a high leverage action step. High leverage action steps are actually steps that apply to benefiting both whole upsides. So when they talk about supporting police and community partnerships in a process to address unique challenges and opportunities and make measurable improvements, they've got a process around pulling together diverse design teams, certifying them in some of these basic principles of engagement around these unique types of tensions we call polarities, conducting pilot projects. These are all ways to create short-term wins in an effort to impact long-term structural improvement. So these are a couple of examples of action steps that the initiative pays attention to in their process. So what we're going to do at the end here is we're going to send you what we call free peeks of the next book that's coming out in the summer. And one of the stories is Charleston, South Carolina, where one of our colleagues, Margaret Seidler, worked with a police chief in Charleston, South Carolina. And they went through this 5-step process of seeing, mapping, assessing, learning, and leveraging. And they actually created some very powerful results, even in the wake of a horrific tragedy, which was the Mother Emanuel AME church shooting that happened in 2015. And through their success, actually that contributed to another project, a sister project in Louisville, Kentucky, that's actually going on right now. And some of the same people who were involved in the Charleston project are involved in this project. And you can see just at a high level, what are some of the things that they've been doing. They pulled together a project management team very similar to a design team that we're talking about with the initiative. You've got steering group members, influencers, facilitators, and then you've got people engaging in the process of looking at these tensions outside of an or lens alone and supplementing with and in order to create better outcomes that are more sustainable for people in their community. So that's really just a high level overview. I wanted to leave time for questions and let the record show I wanted to be done at 5. And
Brilliant.
it's 5 o'clock.
You nailed it.
On the nose. And I nailed
On the
it.
nose.
So thank you very much. And I would love to hear and engage some of your questions now.
You can send it by chat, or you can take yourselves off mute, whatever you feel comfortable with. I'll monitor the chat and read it out to Cliff and Meredith and Bob, Barry.
Maybe we could start with that first question that if you I should have typed it and saved it way back when.
Okay, let me scroll up and get that. It was at the beginning.
Yeah.
There's one thing I would like to respond to, that the suggestion that came up about it was about innovative solutions. But that was really wonderful, and what it created is an opportunity to pay attention to another polarity, which is community enforcement and police enforcement. I mean, and so it's like, where are the places where the community creative dimensions that can come from the community in enforcement. So that just plays with the names of the poles themselves and paying attention to something else. And this is what's wonderful about what happens when you get into looking at polarities. And you say that this is a great insight, whoever created that. And it's like, okay, well, let's look at that. Let's pay attention to that underlying polarity, and they'll start to emerge as you have these discussions, as Cliff was saying. So anyway, that's just a great example of some wisdom that emerged out of that process.
And actually, we engaged with a police agency, and they are, we were talking about community policing, of course, and the leadership, the executive said, on the one hand, he didn't know anything about polarity. On the one hand, I support community policing, but the thought of having X number of officers out there doing their own thing, because it's a collaborative form of policing where you find solutions and creative solutions. The thought of so many officers doing their own thing was it was intimidating, or something that he could not accept or tolerate. So I said, without you realizing it, sir, you've just identified a polarity. So it falls in line with Nikki's question.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to Emma and also Lyndon in the chat. You make a really good point here, Emma, around why are we assuming that these would be solved? What else will emerge? And that's a great point, because what makes a polarity around, for instance, enforcement and engagement, is that the tension is not going away. We can't solve it, and we most certainly can't solve it by choosing a pole. We can maximize the upside benefits of both and minimize the downside limitations, though. We call that leverage. It's actually better than balance. And it has to be really done intentionally, which is why you need diverse key stakeholders from all sides, get everybody's wisdom in the room to figure it out. Because if you're only looking at certain perspectives, then you might be overvaluing certain pole preferences based on the key stakeholders. So the diverse key stakeholders, the design team on the front end, is absolutely critical. You need people, you need police, you need community members, you need activists, you need business leaders, you need religious leaders, you need influencers from the community who know the community and they know it inside out, who can then help support, and they've got credibility and respect through their voice and through their person and who they are. And then we could have these dialogues that end up having us all go to the greater purpose with more intention and more choice and more sustainable outcomes. But the tension's not going away, as Emma pointed out. We have to stay in it, and we have to look at what we're learning in the process. And then Lyndon, what needs to happen at this time in America? Yeah, sorry.
Cliff, before you respond to Lyndon's question, would love to grapple with that statement just now as well, and just push everyone to think a little differently in terms of solutions. Solutions are on a spectrum, and so we have to go in thinking that way. There are different levels of solution. And I would say, if you go into a community with law enforcement and community, or police and community, and have this type of polarity discussion, that in and of itself is a solution, because you're changing the way they're thinking, you're changing the way they're approaching a situation. So for everyone who's involved in this type of work, when it comes to policing, that's something to consider as well. Solution isn't one thing, it's a spectrum of things, and it's going to mean a different thing to different folks. But I'm saying, if you go in and can have this conversation, that's a huge plus.
Wow, thank you for your insights there. That's fantastic.
To that end, we actually have a member of the police here with us who's also part of the design team. Wayne, I'd love to get your voice in and have you share a little bit about what you're thinking.
But also, let's not forget Lyndon's question.
Yeah, can we answer
Oh, yeah.
Lyndon's question?
Sorry, yep.
What needs to happen at this time in America at large scale to address the issues we're seeing with policing? Well, we've got a couple of success stories that we've been trying to build on, not just with Louisville and Charleston, but in other places as well. And I think it's, who comes together on a Saturday afternoon, at least here in DC, the weather is beautiful. It's people like yourselves who care deeply enough around what they're hearing, what they're seeing every day, who want to come together to make a real difference. And so I think if we could secure funding to create design teams to go into these communities and create the container to hold processes to help see and map and assess and learn and leverage our attentions better, we'll create more and more successes, and they breed other successes. It's already happened with Charleston, it's happening in other places. So it's right there. It's waiting for us. So that's what needs to happen is us engaged.
Okay, Wayne's here. And then after Wayne, we have a question from another participant.
Sure.
Okay, well, listen, I will be brief. So it's interesting, and Nadine texted and said, "Wayne, do you want to jump in?" And I thought, well, this is fascinating. I'm actually enjoying hearing the perspective of everyone else, and I kind of want to use my time to point something out. And for those of us on the call that are police officers, you'll know this. For those that aren't police officers, this may come as a surprise to you. But in the 1800s, Sir Robert Peel actually put together the basis and foundation for modern policing. And one of the things, in fact, his key point was that the people are the police and the police are the people. There was a polarity that he was writing back in the 1800s when he put together the Metropolitan Police Service in Great Britain. And it strikes me to who wrote the Lyndon? I think Lyndon asked the question, what needs to be done? There's an argument that can be made to say that we've moved away from what Robert Peel said needs to occur for policing and to be successful and communities to be healthy. The polarity that he recognized back then is the polarity that exists right now. Policing cannot be done by just over enforcement or just focusing on policing or just focusing on the community. The absolute nature, the sheer definition of community policing is a collaboration. It's a relationship between the two so that the community can be healthy because it's the issues, those quality of life issues are addressed by all. So if we can get to the point where we can leverage polarity, if we can leverage polarity thinking, we can begin to develop strategies that will address those deficiencies that we're seeing in law enforcement, but at the same time address some of the deficiencies that we're seeing in our communities. Because in many instances, what we're seeing are symptoms of things like poverty, racism, poor education, lack of jobs, community health concerns like mental health concerns. So I'm applauding all of you for being here. I truly appreciate it. Cliff, I'm also going to say that there is something to be said for enhanced teeth. I thought that was brilliant that you put that in there, and I didn't want you to change it. I saw it. I was like, no, if I chime in here and say that, then this is going to disrupt.
We got to put some teeth into this stuff, right?
Yes, we do. There's good dental hygiene is important. So listen, this is I don't mean to make light of this. I really do not. I spend my days trying to fix what we're seeing happening in our country. I actually live in Rochester, New York. If you don't know, Rochester has lately been a microcosm of what's gone wrong with policing in America. After George Floyd, we had Daniel Prude. We also had an incident where a 9-year-old girl was handcuffed and pepper sprayed for refusing to get into the backseat of the police car all the while she was shouting, "I want my dad, I want my dad." there are very significant things happening in our country that need to be addressed. And part of the reason this resonates with me, part of the reason why I have attached my wagon to Barry and Cliff and Meredith and Nadine is because I see this as a very, very viable component and necessary component to making the changes that we need to see. So thanks very much. I'm glad you're all here, and I would love to have further conversation with you.
Awesome. Let me read a question. This is from Ron Mitchell. He's one of our board members. How do we address moments in time? For instance, in the moment on January 6th, when people were assaulting the Capitol, in the moment, there is a need for policing and enforcement at that moment. That seems the pushback we might get when people are looting stores, they want to see policing. The question then is, how long is a moment? Is it a minute, a week, a month?
Barry, we haven't heard from you for a while. You want to jump on that one?
Yeah, I think the it is important to know that there's a dynamic tension between enforcement and engagement, or any polarity. There's a dynamic tension, and circumstances might call one to pay attention to one pole because the benefits of that pole are required at the moment. But we do that in the awareness that over time we have to intentionally gain the other pole. So just in terms of breathing, we need to inhale and exhale. We do it all the time. But if we wanted to, if we're swimming and we want to in the Virgin Islands and we want to surface dive down to the bottom, we will alter our normal arrangement, our normal rhythm of breathing, and we'll take a deep breath and hold it. This is not our normal breathing arrangement, but it's required for that circumstance. So in the circumstance where you have violence, and I think it's very important to make a distinction between violence towards property and violence towards physical, towards people. But when we need a heavier emphasis on enforcement, then going to that pole that makes real sense. But we don't go to that pole and just say, that's it. That's the setup. You back off when you've done what you've needed to do to gain the benefits of that pole, and you need to then self-correct and move to a more dynamic balance. So that's why it's important to have the polarity in mind. You know you're going to do both, and certain circumstances are going to demand that you focus more on one or the other. So that's and if you don't, then you end up getting severely in the downside of whichever one you've over-focused on. It won't be sustainable. That's the message.
So we've got a minute to go, and there are a couple of things that I kind of want to get in first. I want to thank our speakers today. They are phenomenal. And I want to thank the participants for participating on a Saturday afternoon. Maybe it's sunny where you are, maybe not, but it's still a precious Saturday, and we don't take that lightly. I also want us to pull up the last slide of the presentation. I want you all to take a screenshot so that you can get in touch with folks. This is just to whet your appetite or to introduce you to the thinking, if this is a new way of thinking. If you want more information, you want to do a deeper dive, you've got access, you've got the information here for Polarity Partnerships and so forth. And of course, the initiative, we're always here. And finally, before you leave, we are having another speaker series on May 22nd. We want you to join us. We will be talking with it's called Pain to Progress, and we will be talking with a community-based organization that did just that. They took incredible, painful situation in Georgia with Ahmaud Arbery being killed, and they've turned that pain into purpose and progress. We're going to talk with them, and we are going to also have Tina Lifford, who's actually an author and an actress. She will be joining, and she will help us to talk about how can we as individuals heal ourselves and move out of a state of constant trauma. So we want healthier communities, but since we're all members of the community, we have to be healthier too, right? So we're going to do both, and it's May 22nd, same time. We will circulate invites if you're interested. Hope to see you all, and that's it. Thank you. Brilliant.
Nadine, I wanted to tell you, thank you very much for the invite.
Yep, thanks, Nadine.
It was a pleasure to just watch you, really, just a pleasure. And it was brilliant. It was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Okay,
Well done.
Bye,
bye.
everyone. Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye all.
Nadine hung up. I didn't know that she would. I wanted to do like a quick just check in.
Brief, yeah. Hi, Samina.
Hey, I don't have my camera on because it's been a rough second vaccine shot, but
Oh no.
super
sorry
happy to be here.
hear.
What a great program. Oh, do we still have Reynard on?
Mm-hmm.
Any questions, Renard?
We can, you can disconnect him.
Let me try.
We'll follow up with him.
Uh,
You can do that, I think, if you
Yeah.
want.
Sure, he just walked away from his computer.
possible. I just moved him to the waiting room
Okay.
because I couldn't figure out how to turn him off.
All right, then I'll
Um,
actually turn on my camera. You can see why I didn't before.
Where is Nadine?
Hi,
That was excellent. I mean, like I needed to use the bathroom. I had just gotten back from a funeral, and I haven't left. It was just I didn't want to miss a minute.
yeah,
It was well done, excellent,
it was really great.
and the feedback was really positive. Really, really.
Yeah,
positive.
people really liked it. And at first I was like, oh, this is very like when we were just going through the polls of polarity, I'm like, this is really like philosophical. Like our people, I loved when Cliff took it to like, here's what we're actually like how this could play out with
I
us.
think we had to bring it. I think you had to walk through it that way.
Yeah, so you could understand it, right?
Otherwise, it's just like let's start problem solving without even understanding like the the basics of what we were doing. So I liked going from the 1 to 3, 2, 1.
People
From
really,
the big to the
It really takes time to understand it, and then
yeah.
it's amazing,
Yeah.
and then
Here she is.
and then you sort of test whether or not people get it, and then when you test people, it's like, oh no,
Mhm.
it didn't work. We got to go back.
Yeah, I didn't get
Yeah.
it. Hey, had Nikki Smith Kia been involved before?
No,
yes,
but we know her.
We
Who
know
is
her.
she? I love her.
Yes.
Who is she?
She's a policing expert, actually. She used to be, Meredith, you might remember this from one of our board meetings. She used to work at Arnold Ventures. So we had pitched her
Wow.
when she was at Arnold. She's since left and started her own organization. And she has this initiative, like 30 by 30, to increase the percentage, I think, of female law enforcement chiefs, perhaps, right? By
Leaders.
2030.
Yeah, we love her. I mean, when
Amazing.
she left Arnold Venture, within 30 seconds of her sending us her email, her farewell email, we emailed her like, can we get you? Like, can we, So we might still collaborate on different things, but she started, as Emma said, her own organization. And
Well, but funny enough, Meredith, I thought about you, I think it was yesterday or the day before. She works closely with the chief of staff for our professor at NYU, which we discovered because we reached back out to them this week in the spirit of the world is falling apart and we need more friends than enemies. So, we had a really good conversation with her, with Maureen. And then at the end of the conversation, it turned out that Maureen knew Nikki. And we were like, you know Nikki? Our Nikki? So anyway, thank you, ladies, for doing this on your Saturday.
What were you going to say, Samina?
Oh, I was just going to say, will you save the chat, Emma, down? You just click on the 3 little buttons at the bottom of the chat, the 3 little dots.
I need to stop the recording.